Hello, and welcome to my Game Studies Teachback video essay on Roger Caillois' theory of play from his 1913 book, Man, Play, and Games. In his definition of play, Caillois proposes that all play consists of a combination of four main elements, these being argon, eleia, elinx, and mimicry. He also states that all games fall somewhere along a scale of ludic and pedaic game structure. In this video, I'll be going through the respective concepts of argon, eleia, elinx, and mimicry, discussing what they are, how they relate to modern video games, and using Bloodborne as a case study to demonstrate examples. Then, I will explain the ludic and pedaic game structure and give an example of its application through Bloodborne. Finally, I will be concluding by summarizing the theory into as short an explanation as possible. Argon is originally an ancient Greek word that roughly translates to contest, and the origin for the modern English word of agony. Its meaning within the context of Caillois' theory of play is most easily summarized as competition, although a more accurate description might be a trial to prove superiority. This is because the nature of the competition or struggle within the game is not important. It matters only that the act of achieving the goal of the game involves proving oneself as greater than another element within the game. The largest and most obvious form of argon within modern games is competitive PvP, which, as stated by Brock T. et al. In the 2017 journal article on the problems of treating players' work, has led to a vast esports market. The allure of such games is the competitive aspect of playing with and against other players within the game space, usually with the goal of defeating the other team in virtual combat. However, Bloodborne is a fantastic example of less traditional argon in the form of PvE, or player versus environment. Bloodborne falls into the subgenre of game known as a Souls-like, and is in fact made by the same developer as the Dark Souls game series that spawned the genre to begin with. This genre of games is characterized by its comparatively high level difficulty and general lack of any in-game easy mode, or obvious tutorial. This means that every player is afforded the exact same challenges and scenarios within the game, and therefore must overcome these challenges with nothing but their own merit within the context of the game. In other words, they must prove their superiority over the game itself. This learn-or-die approach is demonstrated through bosses like Father Gascoigne in the early game, who teaches the player about Bloodborne's aggressive playstyle by punishing them with attacks that get exponentially harder to dodge if you try to run away. Thus, the player either learns to play aggressive and not fear the horrifying beasts they fight against, or simply continues to lose.
There's the magic moment. Only 10
Play Golden Eagle today to earn 10.
Eleia is a rather straightforward concept and easily explained as the thrill of chance or luck. Chance, and the way we think about it and interact with it, is a subject of immense interest from a psychological perspective. This most directly relates to forms of play that heavily rely on the simple probability of certain events occurring, the most direct examples of this being dice or cards, which both stand as an element of play within thousands of different games as a convenient method of producing randomized results. As discussed by Lucia D. in Bread and Games, the relationship between games, luck, dice, and state, the way in which players interact with Eleia can take many forms, whether it be rolling dice to simulate randomness within the game, such as in D&D, or using other pieces of in-game information to speculate on the statistical outcome of certain events occurring, such as in poker. These concepts of Eleia carry over into video games very directly as well, whether it be in the random chance of getting the desired item from a loot box, or the path of a projectile from a weapon with randomized spread. These are both examples of what is often referred to as RNG, or random number generation. However, video games are also a fantastic example of another kind of Eleia in the form of the perceived unpredictability or randomness of other people's and in-game enemies' behavior. Within the context of Bloodborne, this aspect of Eleia can be stretched further, as the behavior and actions of enemies and bosses within the game can seem very much random to a player who has not beaten the game before. Being able to predict and adapt to them is essentially what the player is trying to learn, and largely where the in-game skill lies. This unpredictability of a first playthrough also extends to the environment of the game itself and the items one picks up. The fact that the player doesn't know what challenges they will face next, or what loot they will find, leaves them with a distinct sense of anticipation and excitement at the possibilities. The mystery is an important factor of what drives them forward to complete the game.
Woo! Yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for. That's what it's all about. Woo!
Elinx is described as vertigo by Caillois in his theory, which is a tad difficult to understand. A more accurate explanation could be an adrenaline rush, panic, unease, excitement, fear, or a combination of all of those. This could be the excitement and adulation of a football player upon scoring a goal, the rush of visceral panic from skydiving or bungee jumping, or the simmering unease and fear followed by abject terror of a jump scare in a horror movie. Essentially, it's the powerful emotional connection of the player to the game, or that the game invokes within the player, as seen in Wang Wai et al.'s article, Female Players' Emotional Attachment in Role-Playing Video Games. This can be seen in esports in a similar way as it can be seen in traditional sports, with players trying their hardest to win, or in a gacha game as a player pulls their perfect result. Bloodborne provides unique and highly interesting insight into links in gaming, as it is a Souls-like and thus also falls into the genre of action RPG, a style of gameplay which it truly masters in its execution. In Bloodborne, you play as a hunter, which is essentially a human who is biologically enhanced with the blood of beasts, and you fight terrifying monstrosities many times your size and strength. In this way, the odds always feel stacked against you, which may lead you to want to run away. However, every aspect of the game encourages aggression and speed and punishes cowardice. You must challenge these beasts head-on and fight them on a razor's edge between life and death. The only thing keeping you balanced is your own skill. This is taken further with mechanics such as parrying, as if you shoot an enemy as they attack you and just before the attack lands, you can knock them off balance. This then allows you to plunge your hand into their chest and rip it back with a spray of blood and viscera, chunking the enemy's health bar as you do. On top of this, the game enhances all of these elements through audio-visual feedback. The text "Prey Slaughtered" appearing on the screen as a defeated boss explodes into gore, or the loud audible thunk as you land a parry being examples of this and providing an adrenaline rush like no other. However, Bloodborne being a Souls-like also contains elements of horror, which stand as another highly effective example of links, particularly in the form of jump scares. The player is put on edge by the gothic environments and the terrible beasts that stalk the streets, keeping eyes open for all manner of creatures, only to be domed by a flaming ball or spiked log swinging from a tree. Then, as they scan the path ahead for traps, a lupine beast lunges from off-screen and takes a sizable munch from the player's health bar, leaving the player to hyperventilate in a corner of their room for the rest of the playthrough. In this way, the player is never left to relax, and tension is kept high, even outside of combat. Mimicry is another rather straightforward concept, and essentially self-explanatory, being the mimicking or reflecting of real-world phenomena in the game world. This can be seen in the form of abstract ideology reflection, as seen in Roger Caillois and Marxism by Christensen et al., very literal depiction of real-world events, satirical lampooning, or really anything that copies or recreates an aspect of reality in the game world. Many games exist with a form of mimicry being their primary selling point, whether it be a realistic military sim like COD, a video gamified version of sports like FIFA, or a historical sim like Civ 6. The very concept of a sim or simulator is a game which recreates some aspect of reality. Bloodborne is a fantastic example of the way games use real-world phenomena in more abstract ways. In a more obvious sense, Bloodborne is a mixture of Victorian Gothic and Lovecraftian horror fantasy, as stated by Mukherjee H. in Fear the Old Blood, the Gothicism of Bloodborne. This is seen plastered all over the game in its architecture, enemy design, and story, in all of which it mimics the historical and fictional facets and tropes of the given themes. However, as an action RPG, we can see within Bloodborne many standard tropes of the genre, which mimic reality in strange ways. Within RPGs, it's common practice to have a sense of game progression through leveling up. This concept is in and of itself a reflection of capitalistic ideals. The concept that your actions within the game will result in collection of some form of currency, which can then be directly exchanged to make your character physically or mentally better in some way, is in an abstract sense the most direct expression of capitalism possible. The best way to explain Paideia and Ludus is as two opposing ends of a spectrum, as no game can fall entirely into one or the other, and all must contain some elements of both. Paideia is essentially the concept of freedom and how much agency a player has within a game. Ludus is the concept of rules and how much restriction is placed on a player within a game. This means that the pure form of either is impossible, as a game with no rules does not exist as it cannot be defined, and a game with no freedom cannot be played as its player cannot do anything at all. Most games will contain a mixture of Paideia and ludic game structure, with different elements and mechanics falling towards one or the other, causing the game to ultimately land somewhere between the two. Bloodborne is fairly even in its game structure, as it provides multiple forms of player agency, while subtly directing them to play and act in certain ways in order to play the game as intended. An example of Pidaic game structure in Bloodborne would be its leveling and character creation options. The player is free to level their character in any way they wish, in order to optimize the way they play into a variety of builds. They have many different weapons and tools at their disposal, which each offer different ways to play, and they can choose to take slightly different paths through the game in order to acquire certain items. An example of ludic game structure could be the game world, which offers only minimal deviation in terms of how it can be approached, as opposed to an open world, or the gameplay, which despite offering a range of ways to play, it still always falls into some variation of aggressive speed-based combat. In conclusion, Caillois' theory of play states that play can be broken down into a combination of argon, competition, eleia, luck, elinx, vertigo, and mimicry, acting, and that all play occurs within a game, which is made up of opposing ludus, rules, and paideia, freedoms. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and possibly that you've learnt something. If you'd like to learn more about Caillois' theory, the references I use should be on screen now. So like and subscribe, I guess, and thank you, and goodbye.